the soil on Mars is more like regolith. It hasn't had a history of worms, insects and plants mixed in. In 2016, researchers grew tomato, rye, radish, pea, leek, spinach, garden rocket, cress, quinoa and chives in an imitation Martian soil on Earth, producing only slightly less produce than they would have in Earth soil. Interestingly, they did the same experiment again with imitation moon soil, which produced about half the amount of produce. Yet, these crops still grew, with only spinach really struggling to perform. However, it should be noted that organic matter was added to the soil. In this experiment, cut up grass to fertilize the soil and fluff it up, allowing water to pass through the soil to the roots. Without that, the plants wouldn't have lasted long. Another barrier scientists would have to get over, though, is the abundance of heavy metals, and most importantly, something called calcium perchlorate in the Martian soil. Calcium perchlorate is a salt which, like heavy metals, is toxic if consumed in large quantities. This perchlorate and metals in the soil would be absorbed into the plants. Not so great for the plants anyway, but humans would then also absorb it into their systems when they eat the plants. But perchlorate isn't all bad. In fact, it could help humans survive on Mars. For one thing, it sucks water out of the air, which could work. It can also give off oxygen. Again, another critical checkbox for survival ticked. So in short, it seems that there are two major problems to be overcome when growing plants on Mars. The first is the need for fertilizer. Going back to the film and book The Martian, Watney overcame this problem by using feces from the toilet as fertilizer. Typically, this is dangerous, as feces contain pathogens. However, if the feces have been processed to kill the pathogens, it can then be safely used as fertilizer. Once production gets underway, you could always use the compost collected from the old plants and food. The second problem is the toxic perchlorates. Well, this has a simpler solution than you may think. Running water through the soil would rinse the perchlorates out, and you could then separate the water and perchlorates later so nothing is wasted. The alternative is to use perchlorate-eating bacteria, which give off oxygen as a byproduct. There is a reason why growing plants in future colonization efforts is so important. Not only does it make the colony self-sufficient, but there is also evidence that fresh foods, such as tomatoes, blueberries, and red lettuce, are a good source of antioxidants. Having fresh food like these available in space could have a positive impact on people's moods, and could also provide some protection against radiation in space. But without actually doing it, it's hard to say how well it will work on Mars itself. Although it should be said that plants have proven to be versatile. They have grown in Mars simulations on Earth. They've even grown on the International Space Station. The key will be whether plants grown on Mars are safe to eat or not. And the only definitive way to find out is to grow some plants on Mars. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Squarespace gives people a powerful and beautiful online platform from which to create your own website. They have a bunch of features which you can integrate seamlessly into your own website, like their audio block feature to embed your podcasts or music with iTunes support, or something I find particularly useful, which is the ability to link various social media platforms to your website and embed videos. So, if you're looking to build a website, give it a go. If you use the link squarespace.com/Astrum, you can try it out for free and get 10% off your first purchase. Thanks for watching. These Astrum Answers questions are picked in a fortnightly poll by patrons and members. If you'd like to participate and also support the channel, find the links in the description. And if you have a question you'd like answered, ask in the comments below. All the best.
Качество зашкаливает, то есть нельзя.
Так, итак, доходы, расходы, налоги, итого прибыль за
Заблокировать надо. Ну, наверное, как играть заниматься будешь? Да, я понял. Все правильно, да. Я понял.
Hello, I'm Sebastian Hille, honoring engineer at Epic Games. And hi, I'm Teddy Bergsman. I'm director of Quixel, and we were just acquired by Epic. And we couldn't be more excited to now be part of the Epic family. Our mission is to scan the world and to make photorealistic content accessible to everyone. As part of Epic, we're now greatly accelerating this mission and can offer a vast library of 3D scans for free to all Unreal Engine users. We've spent the past decade on expeditions across the world and making scans accessible to creators. The result is Megascans, Bridge, and Mixer. Megascans is the world's largest and fastest growing library of scan data. It contains every piece of content you need for creating any scene imaginable. Bridge lets you instantly access the entire scan library and download content straight into Unreal with a single click, making it a huge time saver. Mixer empowers anyone to create art, marrying scans with painting and proceduralism to quickly create completely unique content. When the Megascans ecosystem is combined with the power of Unreal Engine, creating beautiful environments is incredibly fun and easy. Fire up the engine, grab all the high-quality assets you need, and start building amazing worlds, all for free. Megascans
Итак, расходы, доходы, налоги.
Scans is widely used by the world's leading game and film studios, and today, most major titles rely on the library. When we started Quixel, our goal was to make a positive impact on computer graphics. Building photorealistic 3D content for games and film is expensive and painstaking, and it can take hundreds of artists years to bring a single grand vision to life. We wanted to change this. We wanted to create a world where even a single person with a strong vision could make their dreams come true and create experiences that rival the biggest productions of today. And with Epic Games having set Megascans free, I believe that world is now a reality. Yes.
And with Unreal today, you can already render those large worlds with massive landscapes and with high-quality assets, such as the one from Quixel. And those worlds are likely going to be lit by a sun and a sky, and you will likely want to move the sun around to change the lighting condition according to the time of day. We have made that process a lot more robust and simpler now with the sky atmosphere component. You can just add a directional light to your scene, drop a sky atmosphere component, and you
Итого прибыль за месяц.
Погодите, прибыль? То есть у вас за последний...
Theodore Seuss Geisel, aka Dr. Seuss, which originally is supposed to be pronounced Dr. Seuss, but I'm not going to say that because there's probably only like 5 people on the planet who pronounce it that way, and Geisel himself eventually switched to the anglicized version. Dr. Seuss was one of the most famous and successful children's book authors and illustrators in the world, with his books selling more than 500 million copies. And for many of us, his works produce cherished childhood memories. And while his use of language and his storytelling abilities are something to be admired, his artwork was also a memorable and integral part to his stories. Dr. Seuss's signature, wacky, gravity-defying art style is unmatched in its uniqueness. And while we all know Dr. Seuss mainly for his excellent children's books, animations, and the maybe not-so-excellent films made after his death, there are many artworks that are not as known but still definitely worth talking about. Dr. Seuss began as a cartoonist in the 1920s for magazines and other publications, such as Life and Vanity Fair. In 1931, Dr. Seuss illustrated a book called The Pocketbook of Boners. At the time, boner did not have the sexual connotation it has today, and originally meant a silly mistake. It was a humorous book full of illustrations, and was one of the best-selling paperbacks of World War II. This book was actually a collection of 4 books titled Boners, More Boners, Still More Boners, Prize Boners, and then even more compilations were released, titled The Omnibus Boners and The Second Omnibus Boners. That's a lot of boners. In 1937, Ted Geisel wrote and illustrated his first children's book, And to Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street, which had lackluster sales but garnered glowing reviews because of its imaginative story and visuals. Around the 1930s, Dr. Seuss collected things like antlers and other leftovers from dead animals, which his father would send him as he worked at the Springfield Zoo. He would take these parts, combine them with papier-mâché and paint, and transform them into busts of fictional creatures. He called the eventual 18 sculptures that would result from this process unorthodox taxidermy. Some of my favorites have to be the goo-goo-eyed Tasmanian woolghast, the Mulberry Street unicorn, the sea-going dilemma fish, and the sawfish. That one has a surprisingly normal title. Later, but still pretty early in his career, he became a political cartoonist, and during World War II produced over 400 cartoons. The funny thing about these drawings is that many of them contain creatures and caricatures that are very familiar to the wacky animals later seen in his children's books. So it gets very surreal when you see something like Horton representing the GOP, and Adolf Hitler drawn in his signature whimsical style. But just to be absolutely clear, Dr. Seuss was very opposed to fascism and American isolationism during World War II, but he wasn't always on the right side of history, especially when you highlight these 2 comics. Ooh, ooh, these are, highlight these 2 comics. Ooh, ooh, these are spicy. These are very spicy. Of course, you have to keep in mind the time period when these depictions were acceptable. And yes, he did support the Japanese internment camps at the time, but clearly his ideas changed quite a bit later on. These political cartoons, while interesting, are not as polished or witty as the children's books he would later write. Dr. Seuss's art style has remained very consistent throughout pretty much all of his career. To demonstrate this, you can take a quick glance at any of the advertisements that he illustrated and immediately recognize his signature style. Anything from Ford to Standard Oil to a detailed drawing of hell for General Electric. I cannot understate how unique and recognizable Ted Geisel's art style was. His figures are simple, yet complicated. Plain and rounded, droopy faces contrast with intricate cross-hatching on things like clothes and fur. His characters are very gestural and lively, and his buildings and machinery are no different. They often seem to defy gravity, and rarely contain any straight lines. The use of cross-hatching and reliance on pen and ink, along with the strategic flat colors seen in most of his books, probably comes from his experience as a cartoonist, with the goal of keeping the interest of younger audiences. And combined with the ridiculous designs of his creatures and machines, they all form an identity that is overwhelmingly and undeniably Seussian. While the rhymes, inventive made-up words, and timeless storytelling are the core of his children's books, the imagery he uses to bring that whimsical poetry into visual forms is essential to the experience of a Dr. Seuss work. And what makes this style more intriguing is when it's put into different situations, from political cartoons to taxidermy. But there is another collection of lesser-known Dr. Seuss art that I find the most interesting of them all. Dozens of paintings that Dr. Seuss made in private, and were not to be released until after his death. A collection he liked to call the Midnight Paintings. What strikes most people first about these paintings is how different they are from his mainstream works. There's a lot more black and other colors in these works, and many of them have a more ethereal quality. Clearly, these paintings were made for more emotive and leisure goals rather than storytelling ones. It's hard to summarize the many paintings he produced behind closed doors, so it's really best to approach them case by case. These secret Dr. Seuss works have a variety of styles and subjects. This painting, titled Cat Detective in the Wrong Part of Town, is reminiscent of Cubist works, but with brighter colors and typical Seussian architecture. A few other paintings contain a similar style, but for subjects like resorts. Others are more dramatic, forcing the viewer into unorthodox perspectives like this Dutch-angle view of blobs of color leaping out of a brightly colored ocean, or this drastically curved landscape that seems to extend for infinity. Some are entirely abstract. Others are more pattern-based, like this painting of dozens of working-class birds walking up and down, made to express Geisel's economic concerns. Then this painting, a plethora of cats, was made for a simple reason, to show a lot of cats, but more specifically as a form of relaxation to see how many cats he could paint in. And how many are on this one canvas exactly? 392. A more satirical set of works, called the La Jolla Bird Women, resulted from Geisel people-watching from his La Jolla Tower studio. These thin bird folk were made to gently poke fun at his neighbors, and as you would expect, they are quite simple. They're women, but birds. The works I think are most interesting are the ones that are darker, both in color schemes and subject matter. A very simple painting titled Cat in Obsolete Shower Bath demonstrates the purely aesthetic choices of the darker paintings. The brushstrokes and layering of color is erratic. There's no flat or smooth colors, just textural, grungy spots forming the environment. The greenish yellow of the shower curtain is reminiscent of mold. There is
Найдите работу на лучших условиях среди сотен тысяч вакансий на Авито, например, с удобным графиком.
For his speculation, this is meant to represent how early in his life, Ted Geisel had to spend time in dingy one-room apartments. These overlapping gradients and textural painting is a far cry from the clean, calculated coloring of his children's books. And many of these paintings seem to represent a seedier, almost cynical aspect we didn't usually see in his art. One of my favorite paintings, Cat from the Wrong Side of the Tracks, seems to imply just from the title the subject is an inversion of the child-friendly Cat in the Hat. The face is more angular, his whiskers unkempt, and his aura is overall more sinister. To complement this, we get more Seussian architecture but applied to a pool table, with a bunch of nonsense angles and extreme distortion. One of my favorite details is the beads above his head. Everyone knows the saying, a cat has 9 lives, right? Well, let's just say that it seems 8 of his beads are used up, and there seems to be just 1 left. A similar painting, Indistinct Cat with Cigar, develops a theory that left. Let's just say that it seems 8 of his beads are used up, and there seems to be just 1 left. A similar painting, Indistinct Cat with Cigar, develops a theory that these cat representations could be something of an alter ego, considering that Dr. Seuss was a lifelong smoker. And just like how he never smoked where a child might see him, these paintings too remained hidden. It's hard to find any self-portraits of his that are positive or pleasant. One of them is quite blatantly titled, Self-Portrait of the Artist Worrying About His Next Book. So it seems to me some of these works might have been Dr. Seuss's version of vent art. Well, that's probably an oversimplification, but you get what I mean. Probably one of the creepiest, darker paintings is Surly Cat Being Ejected, where this grotesquely long cat is being sent away by this almost faceless, mannequin-like woman in the dead of night. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why I find this work slightly unsettling, but I would guess it's the combination of all the uncanny and distorted elements. Of course, in contrast, there are many hopeful and bright paintings, such as this sunny seascape, full of roaring waves and the impossibly long tail of a bird being manipulated by the great swirls and fluctuations of the wind. The dynamic shapes that Geisel so masterfully produces gives this painting a great sense of energy and movement. Then there are paintings that walk a delicate middle ground between melancholy and hopefulness, such as The Great Cat Continuum, made during his later years. Dr. Seuss's cat seems to walk through an enormous line of windows from one experience to the next, each with slightly different shapes and distortions. There are a few with biblical meanings, such as this depiction of the Tower of Babel, or this cat named Joseph Katz sporting a brightly colored outfit, clearly alluding to the story of Joseph and his brothers. But the ones that are my favorite come from a stage in the Midnight paintings often referred to as Geisel's Deco period, referring to the black backgrounds and golden structures. The iconic and strange, asymmetrical, slightly organic architecture is illogical, almost alien, even more so than in his books, because this time there is few basic structures to even signify something inhabitable, not even a window or roof. The only thing that is an indicator are the stairs that seem to lead nowhere. And when you have this architecture set in front of an almost pure black background, both with a single creature resting in the middle, you get this immense sense of isolation, abandonment even. It is difficult to assume that the people who built these structures are even living there anymore, but the creatures currently relaxing in these structures are happy. They are a beacon of life and hope, and that's why with this sense of isolation, you also get this immense sense of tranquility. Other Deco paintings give off similar feelings, but not as intensely as these two. When I first heard about these secret paintings, I wanted to find some sort of code to crack, some puzzle or hidden meaning behind these private works that could possibly unlock some of Dr. Seuss's genius, or give some magical window into the man's soul, or reveal some deep, dark secret. But of course, these paintings are a variety of things. None of them really gossip-worthy. And while they do reveal some sides to Ted Geisel that were previously unknown, they are also fun, humorous, and express his imagination just as well as in his books, but with more coloring and subject matter freedom. The many atmospheres and moods expressed in the Midnight paintings are often different from his books, but I can say with utmost confidence, they are just as creative. Paintings make my corneas hurt. I'm ashamed that this artist lived in my former hometown. The George W. Bush of art. Worthless. They make me want to puke. They are false works. They are awful. Simply awful. It belongs in the trash. It is stupid art for stupid people. The worst paintings I've ever seen, and they will haunt me for the next half an hour. Those are all real quotes from comments, reviews, and articles concerning one artist and his work. Gee, these paintings must be pretty bad then, huh? What are they, pictures of babies eating each other alive? The scatological scribbles of a lunatic? No. These are the kinds of paintings those quotes are referring to. Now, if you're like me, you might be a bit confused. Why, oh why, are these seemingly unremarkable paintings of cottages one would usually see on the covers of jigsaw puzzles so viciously hated by some people? In fact, not just hated, but accused of being dishonest, damaging to art and culture itself. These are works by the late artist Thomas Kinkade. You could make a very good case that Thomas Kinkade was the most successful artist in the 21st century so far. His works can be seen on mugs, t-shirts, calendars, and probably somewhere in your grandmother's living room. Thomas Kinkade's own company claims his work can be seen in 1 out of every 20 American homes. and at the height of his career, his company generated $130 million in sales in 1 year. Now, I could totally see how someone could dislike his work. Perhaps they find it too excessive in its sentimentality, or is garish, or perhaps they find it simply generic. But to capital H, hate it. I admit I was initially a bit confused by that. In fact, people hate the art and the man so much that in articles about the man's death, you can find such comments as these. I hate Thomas Kinkade with every fiber of my being. Our long national nightmare is over. There's nothing wrong with liking Kinkade's paintings, but, in my opinion, there is something wrong with people that like his paintings. Yeah, that's basically the same thing. The thing is that the people that buy this crap are ignorant morons from the southeast and midwest of the US. You know, the people responsible for electing George Bush. Their opinions on art are about as valid as a Gibbons opinion on quantum physics. Sir or madam, I know this is the internet, but if you could kindly remove your head from your own rectum, I think you'd be doing yourself a favor. What could have possibly prompted such venom from a few cottage paintings? What you'll find is that the reason for this hatred may have less to do with the art itself and more to do with matters of taste, the art world, and even as you saw in the last comment, politics. Today we'll learn about the many reasons to hate a Thomas Kinkade.
Смешно, интересно. Ни о чем вообще. Чем ты чаще смотришь? Чем? Ни о чем. Все, это все заблокировал, ты думал, что... Ну, не надо пока.
How's it going? I do a lot of game jams, but I tend not to do the larger game jams because they typically use a 48-hour format, which I'm personally just not a fan of. Basically, every time I do a 48-hour game jam, I lose 2 consecutive days because I just become really obsessed. So with that, here's how I spent the last 48 hours, as I'm starting writing and recording this devlog about 4 hours after submissions have closed.